Giving everyone a moment to find their way back to the screen. If you're joining us here. So we would like you to come with us for a picnic, and that is the invitation today. And with the promise of a bountiful feast on the horizon, we want to first actually take you back to reflect a little bit on the journey that brought you here. There were some beautiful things that we noticed when we were in the woods, when we were walking through, barefoot or otherwise. And in some of the spaces, you might have noticed where there was some rot or some pale leaves that didn't look quite at full health, and maybe needed a bit of care or a bit of magic or inspiration to help them thrive. And these are all symptoms in the system that can help us to understand where things maybe aren't working as well as we might like them to, or where perhaps things could be thriving better if there was an opportunity to do things a bit differently, and a disruption in the day-to-day. So a few of our huddle are going to share with you now their perspective on the day-to-day in government and their context, and what potential they see collective imagination practice could have to shift things there. They might share with you the cracks in the system, or the ways in that they see, but I'll hand over to them to share that with you. And first, I'm going to welcome the Hello Vignette moment, Neha. Neha, are you ready to share?
Yes, thank you, Jasmine, and hi everyone. So my name is Neha. I am a policy designer within Policy Lab UK, which is what brought me to this huddle. So just to give a bit of context around where I'm coming from. So Policy Lab is a multidisciplinary team. We've been around for 10 years, and we've always had this sort of mission to radically change the way that policy is made and try to kind of open up the ways that we might do that through a variety of approaches. So looking at people's kind of lived experiences, using design approaches. And recently, I think it's really felt like there's been a kind of opening as well to use more kind of imagination-based techniques as well, and use collective imagination as a way to envision new systems, imagine new futures, and new ways to get there as well. And it feels like it's been feeling like there's a need for methods that really take us forward and encourage us to ask more questions like, what if? And that for me was that kind of main pull into this huddle. I've previously had the chance to have a taste of practices such as moral imaginings, legislative theatre. So I was just really interested and curious to get the chance to experience and experiment more with approaches, because I think that is part of that kind of crack that Jasmine spoke about having that chance to kind of really experience and feel these methods in action, as hopefully you'll get a chance to do today, to then understand where in the future, where those opportunities arise, you sort of start to see where maybe there is chance to kind of plant new seeds. And I think sort of reflections on me on this process so far has been really around, I think often we can kind of find ourselves where rational kind of thinking and mindset and being evidence-based is put at the opposite end to being imaginative and kind of the ideas around collective imagination. And actually through this process, I feel like through some of the constellating work that we've been doing and system sensing, that actually they don't often want to be at polar opposite ends. They actually are kind of wanting to work more closely together. So I think, and that it actually allows us to collective imagination, these practices allow us to tap into other forms of wisdom that we might have that sort of just sit underneath that kind of rational brain. I think the hard part about it is that it takes time. It takes a bit of slowing down, which doesn't always come naturally. And I think as you're sort of experiencing today, I think the question that I'd maybe just pose is to kind of consider after this is how we sort of allow each other to slow down and give each other a bit more space to kind of really give ourselves the space that's needed for these practices and approaches to really kind of bed in, while also recognizing that, you know, there are challenges, and citizens as civil servants often want us to kind of tackle these problems quickly, but how do we find that balance and slowness that's often required to do that? So that's kind of the approach that I was kind of coming to with this huddle. I don't know who I'm passing on to next.
I think you're passing on to me now, so thank you. In typical government fashion, I've got a PowerPoint to share. So it's just a few slides to give you a bit about my work context, why I've joined this huddle, and what it's giving me. So I'll share my screen now. So hopefully you're seeing that. Are you seeing my presentation?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, thanks. So, I'll just go on to it here. My name is Joanne Doyle, and I am the team leader for Strategic Approaches and Programmes team in Natural Resources Wales. So my team leads the integration of sustainable management of natural resources into our programs and processes. This work is driven by our Wellbeing for Future Generations Act and the Environment Act, which has led us to launch our corporate plan, an ambitious corporate plan, talking about meaningful partnerships to drive transformational change, and real focus on collaboration and engagement. So a lot of my team's work is actually looking at how we do that, how we look at quality of relationships through our grant funding and other funded partnerships. I'll go on to my next slide. So in my world, we often look at systems like hard systems, and we're familiar with using tools like Three Horizons, Iceberg, Theory of Change, but we're not very familiar with soft system sensing and these capabilities that we need to do that. A sort of ongoing joke in our huddle has been very early on. In I think our second session, I was on summer holidays with poor connection, but I was assuming the voice of rational mindset. So this idea of rational mindset struggling to connect has been sort of an ongoing theme in the work, because it is very easy to relate to that in my work. So in my role, looking at, as I said, quality of relationships and our grant funding process has been what has kind of led me to this collective. And it has been a sort of nourishing space to step away from that cognitive thinking and to explore creative practices to sense make. It has been uncomfortable at times because it's not something that, it is easy to bring into my work context. But it is so important, because it is the way that we can actually realize how we can sustain nature and enhance future generations at the same time, which is what we have in our legislation in Wales. And we do talk about using the Wellbeing for Future Generations Act as a guide to bridging the gap between where we are now and achieving a sustainable future. And when I joined this collective, my inquiry question was, how do we use collective imagination to design a systemic grant program? And at the time, that was because my team were leading on developing this grant program for transformation. But a couple of weeks into the huddle, the budget for that was cut. And sometimes it can be really difficult to see where we can bring collective imagination into our work, where we can slow down, as Neha said, and take time to focus on the qualities of the relationship. But that is why being part of this huddle has been so valuable for me, because we have looked at these activating and resisting forces. We have looked at how we can bring in other voices, which really resonates. How do we give nature its voice? And we've looked at how we create stories of change, so we can actually create, we can sort of bring our own capabilities to reimagining the future. So for me, in my work, it's really important to find allies to continue to see how I can bring collective imagination into my space in Wales, in Natural Resources Wales. Thank you. And I think I'm passing over to, is it Matt?
Yes, I think it is me. Morning, everyone. I'm Matt Rebaliati, Head of Policy, Research and Communications at the UNESCO UK Commission. UNESCO, or the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, was founded in 1945 in London following the Second World War. Next year is its 80th anniversary. And it was really set up actually embodying much of the collective imagination practice. The Second World War, as we know, had seen huge destruction of, well, half the world going to conflict, 50 million dead, but also the huge destruction of culture, educational systems. And it was born in the sort of the Blitz during the Second World War. And there was a group of people, ministers, governments in exile who said, actually, political and economic arrangements between governments are not enough to create long and lasting peace. And what we actually need is people, communities, academics around the world using culture, education, science, and communications as tools to foster peace and a long and sustaining peace. So for the last 80 years, UNESCO has worked with specialists, communities and groups all around the world to create the foundations of peace through culture and education. In the UK, we are funded by the Foreign Office, and one of my big roles is to coordinate dozens of experts with the UK government in those areas of education and science, everything from the tsunami warning system to World Heritage to the protection of journalists. And one of the other areas that we look at is looking after and helping and supporting a network of UNESCO sites across the UK, which cover around 14% of the UK's landmass and have about 10 million people living in them. They are part of a global network of sites that cover 10 million kilometers squared, that's the size of Canada or China, and have about 500 to 600 million people in them. Those include things such as World Heritage sites, but also areas such as biospheres and cities. And they protect and conserve the world's outstanding cultural and natural heritage, but they're also tools and ways to bring communities and people together to create a collective imagination of a common humanity. And the reason why I was interested in collective imagination as a practice was that a number of years ago, we did a survey with the Canadian government, surveying this network of UNESCO sites that we have across the UK and Canada. And what we found was, and that was in the survey focused on everything from threats from climate change to threats to biodiversity, etc. And what we found was that these network of UNESCO sites were facing huge threats and challenges. And as Jasmine said, I think the woods we're in, if the woods are UNESCO sites, then the leaves are dying and deep change is actually staring under the surface. But one of the most interesting things that we found was that, yes, UNESCO sites and these places are facing these challenges, but actually what they're also facing is acute challenges around financial and human resources to bring people, communities, and organizations together to actually imagine and address those challenges. And that was one of the biggest challenges they faced. They also had big challenges around sharing information and data. And it wasn't that these challenges and data don't exist. They just sit in about 25 different public sector bodies who don't talk or work together. And actually, a lot of the time, they are working to address one challenge that then actually has problems or issues for other parts or sites. So actually, the crack in the system for me was really around how do we use UNESCO sites as participatory tools and mechanisms to bring people and communities together to build more resilient futures for places? And we have a number of funded projects in this space. But a lot of work that we've done over the last couple of years with community groups and others, and we've brought them together, and we've trialed new ways of working and getting government departments and people at the national and local level to work. But actually, people are still stuck in their silos. Even if you bring them together into a room, it's not always working. So the collective imagination piece was really an opportunity for me to understand and work with this fantastic group to explore new ways of working. How do we actually use collective imagination as a tool to actually instill new ways of working at the national and the local level? And the experience from the group has been fantastic, because actually, as everyone has already spoken, and I won't repeat, it's not always has to be serious. It doesn't always have to be the big challenge. Actually, you can bring in positive narratives, you can bring in fun, you can actually bring in completely different ways of working. We've spoken about rational mindset, and actually it's getting people to connect as people outside of their organizations and challenges, and using that as a tool, which has been a really powerful thing that I'm taking with me going forward. So yeah, it's been a really interesting couple of months, and yeah, I'll leave it there. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll come in now. Thanks, Matt. That was really interesting to get that insight. I'm I'm going to share a little bit about my experience of this program through the lens of what the work I do. So I work at the Greater London Authority with Mayor of London's culture team, the culture, creative industries, and 24-hour London team specifically. And we work closely with the health and public health teams because I work across creative health policy. Creative health is the idea that creativity and culture is key to human well-being. And it is also essential to our health, and that it can play a key role in our societies in improving how we live, how we recover from illnesses, or how we live with long-term illness. It can take the form of music, painting, dancing, gardening, cooking, all sorts of things. Creativity, as we all know, comes in many forms, and it can happen in libraries, at home, in hospitals, in the street. The fact is that that there are huge health inequalities in London. We are very aware of that, but and we also know that culture and creativity can be a tool for people's well-being journeys, can be a fresh approach, and bring lots of solutions to issues that they face. However, there's an inequality of accessing the potential to do arts and culture as well. So really, the work that we're doing is cross-sector working. How can we support the movement that is already happening of the arts sector and cultural sector working with the health and social care sector and speaking together? And what that means really is getting big systems that are very complex and operate at many levels, in the neighborhood, at council level, also with a main government agenda, to shift and look at potential of what happens when we reach out to something that's different, that's unknown. And it might look like a collaboration with a local theater company, or working with an opera to do breath work for people recovering from lung illnesses. There's all sorts of collaborations that can happen. But what we're finding is that there's a lot of stuckness in imagining how can we go beyond the existing systems and the way that they work. And the role of collective imagination really is about opening up and allowing us to think beyond the existing systems. So what I've done in the past is work with the idea of science fiction. If we, instead of just focusing on the NHS as it is now or as it might be next year, what about imagining what a health service looks like in 50 years' time? What do we want that to be, and how can we dream that up together with our tools and our resources from different sectors and our knowledge, and then work our way to seeing what are the steps towards that. And the mayor has a convening power to bring people together, to do collaboration and innovation together. And so it's been really fascinating to explore with my colleagues what are the practical tools that I can use in the very tight frameworks that sometimes we have to bring people together. And in a specific way, sometimes it is about a 1 hour and a half meeting with high-level stakeholders, where, it feels like a radical act to remove the board table that people usually sit around with their laptops. Can we remove that table? Can we invite people to close their eyes and to think of something different and approach it from a different angle, and what's going to come out of that? I think mostly what I've gotten from this process is a little bravery, perhaps, to think, how do I dare take the board table away in those spaces that I organize? So yeah, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Dan now.
Thanks, Clara. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the need to get outside for a collective imagination picnic. I've been in the sort of host role of this collective imagination huddle and supporting the group to capture some of our insights as we've been sort of going through our journey together. And I wanted to share a couple of patterns across our conversations because, yeah, it feels interesting to spot some of those patterns. And then we want to give you a taste of like this collective imagination practice as well, and stop talking about. But when we spoke about the challenges of bringing this work into government contexts, there was a lot about how skepticism and conservatism are kind of baked into the culture, especially in the UK, and that you have to really prove the value of something rationally before you do it. And so there's a low appetite for risk, and there's change is more feared than encouraged actually in practice. And how do we work with that when we're bringing collective imagination in? And government structures themselves also don't give much space for exploring what's in between or to things that are genuinely otherwise and different. So there are silos, hierarchies, established procedures and methodologies that drive productivity in a helpful way, but also don't allow for much space for failure. And that can be, again, a challenge for welcoming in something quite different like collective imagination. We really like the metaphor of being the ivy in the cracks, and shout out to Lucy Williams from the Slow Work Garden for that metaphor. And it not really being about shifting all of these structures at once, but about finding the places to open up to fresh possibilities and building from there. Bringing in new ways of seeing and starting to build belief that, we can do things a little bit differently, and building hope through the practice amidst some of the complexity that exists in government. It being about disrupting some of those older patterns and demonstrating new ones in practice and modeling something a little bit different, and creating some of the breathing space that I think Neha was talking about as well, moving away from the kind of scarcity thing and the survivalism that's a really dominant frame in some of these contexts. Part of that is about connecting to the skepticism that exists in the system. So as Joanne was saying, it's really helpful to recognize and understand the role of rational mindset and how it can sometimes struggle to connect with these things that feel quite different. And so part of that is about the small steps and bridges to the different ways, and being able to shape shift to the different contexts and make it safe for people that are coming with quite a healthy dose of skepticism. And that's helpful. and working with the momentum and the activating forces in the system that you're working in particular. And so we spoke about equity, youth empowerment, integrated approaches to health and resilience, some of the places and examples where we're working with the change that's already happening, where there's some space to come and bring in some of these practices and tools. Yeah, and like making space for the otherwise, what does that look like in government contexts? A lot of our explorations were about welcoming in difference in different forms, so different ways of knowing. A really strong theme around embodiment and taking you out of the rational to feel rather than think and live into some of the alternatives. And we experimented with constellations as a collective imagination practice, as a method of shifting stuckness in government and in policy making, which was really interesting. Another way in was bringing in different voices, so connecting with different parts of the system that might not be being heard at the moment. And we experimented with 4D mapping, looking at tax policy and bringing in non-human voices in the policy making process, for example. And we also experimented with stepping into different roles, so stepping out of some and into others, the role of rational mindset and having the role of the immigrant child, of the sea turtles, and doing that playfully and being able to have a conversation between these different roles in the system and what that can open up in terms of what's possible in the policy shaping process. Yeah, and so bringing in these sort of different forms and shape-shifting was a big part of our conversations, but also recognizing the importance of building allyship with other quiet radicals in the system, as we called it, like nurturing these peer spaces between these people that can grow and spread together. And so finding some of those people in your context feels really important. Like, who are the partners that you can work with within the government context that you're particularly involved with? And it being less about collective imagination activities, actually, which can often be really good and powerful, but actually collective imagination being a capacity to be built as well, a muscle to grow and strengthen over time. And like, what changes when you see it like that was a question that we were asking as well. Yeah, I'm going to hand back over to Jasmine now to kind of lead us into our next bit.
Thank you, Daniel. And everyone who's shared their experience of government practice. Sorry, I've got a bit of feedback in my headphones, so yeah, a bit difficult to speak. But moving onwards, now that we have heard from people about what's going on in their little corners of the forest and the darker corners that need to learn some light in, and other bits and pieces that are going on there that we can learn from. We want to invite everyone to come with us to have a picnic. And the reason that we're talking about having a picnic is because we're moving beyond like a traditional concept of, you might hear about building a toolkit, and that can often feel quite extractive or just not very rich in learning from the wisdom of everyone in the room, that it's something that you get given and take away and try and use in your context. And we understand that every context has a rich specificity, and it's important to lean into that. But we also know that everyone in this room has stuff to share. And so we are going to bring a few offerings in after a short break, because I think we do have time, actually. Just checking with you, Daniel, on that. For a few more sort of thank you in the comments. Yeah, a few more things to nourish us as we step into this space together, and then we'll have some opportunities to reflect on what we might like to take away, what we might like to share with one another, and do a bit of an exchange in that picnic as well. Noticing that a picnic is often something where we come together to share between and bring our own offerings to nourish the whole group, rather than just one person. Okay. As if there anything that anyone else would like to add from the huddle? If not, I think I'll invite us to take a 5-minute break. So should we take 5 minutes, Daniel, or 10?
Yeah, I think a 5-minute stretch and like that might be nice in the middle. Yeah, I think that's always welcome. Yeah, and loving seeing what's coming through in the chat as well. Like other questions, things that you want to chat about, please do put in the chat. That's really helpful.
Do we come back at 48 or 10 to? Did you say 10 to? Yeah.
Yeah, let's come back at 10 to.
Start back. Okay. We can't hear you, Daniel. You're muted.
And now the recording's going. I'm going to get us going again. And thanks for bearing with the interference just before the break. Sometimes when you're on a picnic, the technological wasps can just get you, and that is a part of the experience. So yeah, thanks for bearing with. But we're actually ahead of time slightly, so we wanted to create space for some of the amazing questions that are coming into the chat. And I wonder if anyone would like to speak theirs into the room. And if not, maybe, yeah, Deborah?
I mean, I wrote something kind of a bit complex on there, but my simple question is how do we hold the science and the work simultaneously? Because I was on I went to see Dougal Hine on Tuesday night, talking at Kairos, and he feels much more in the space of what the world is going to be looking like in the next few decades. And I just feel there's something so hard about this work for all of us to sit in that space of complexity. That's a question for anyone.
I'm happy to pop out a response to that if does anybody else want to join me. So I come from the imagination side, work in systemic constellations and part of this huddle. And the way my journey has taken me to be able to bring those two sides together and sit with them simultaneously is to accept reality as it is and to accept that we are where we're meant to be. This is part of a journey and we need to go through this to get to the next place. We can't sidestep it. If you think, as some talk about humanity being in adolescence, you can't suddenly go from being age 13 to being 23 and being through that. You have to go through the process. So the somehow just accepting, it doesn't stop us having the impetus and the hope and to know that we'll move through it. It doesn't take away the fact those adolescent years are very difficult, but we're in the right place. That's my personal thoughts. That's not speaking on behalf of the Huddle as a whole, but it's the place that I come from.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can add to it saying that, yeah, I feel there is a lot of place for grief and part of my work is create spaces for grief, for our grieving, but also is to realize that what we're actually grieving is not the end of life, and it's not even probably the end of humanity. It's just the end of how we manage the planet up until now. And the system itself is dying, not necessarily life. And I started to write a book. I have just one page on it some years ago about the future. In that future, we live in a climate chaos, so there is a lot of problems in the world. But actually, it's a pretty, amazing future, because actually, all of humanity is working together to restore the planet. So imagine living in a world where there is a shared purpose and vision for humanity. So again, I don't know what the future is, but I think, as we are grieving, we also need to realize what we're grieving is actually not the end of life, or even the end of humanity, probably is actually the end of the system. And there's a place for that, but there's also something else that it's really hard for us to even imagine, but maybe we can try.
Thank you.
I was going to come in with my with some thoughts from me. As well as finding my way into this huddle, I have also fallen down several sort of different rabbit holes, and one of them is the sort of Indie Johar rabbit hole, where you are thinking about the different possibilities and holding this sort of hopefulness about the connections that you can make, because you can imagine the very, very worst and see the very, very worst, and then you can have an imagining of how we work together to not be in that place. And I appreciate it's really difficult to sort of find a balance and have a balance in what doesn't feel balanced at all. But at the same time, one of the things that being part of this group is helping with is creating that agency for yourself and finding how you get to be, I've gone very croaky, sorry. Finding how you get to be the person creating the space and making the connections and making the possibilities for other people, bringing all of those things together. So in government, I've been in central government for about 9 years. This idea that there's evidence-based thinking and doing is, is also not quite, that doesn't quite hold true. So we say we are evidence-based, but what are we doing? And what we're doing is saying we bring only this sort of pure rationality into this place. And I think that's what the balance that needs to be redressed there. So how do you bring these other parts? How can you bring playfulness? How can you bring imagination? How can you bring hope? How can you bring all of these things and make space for them and agency for the people you're with? So those are the things that I ask, and I will stop talking.
Thank you, everyone. That was a really rich moment of discussion, and I'm sure we could keep going, and also want to lift up the question from Claire Lovett in the chat about how to be a pink sock in the tumble dryer and to sustain yourself during that tumble. I think that's a really lovely analogy and way of putting it, and maybe there'll be some offerings in the next part, or maybe that's something that you can bring as a question to the picnic, and that will make more sense in a moment. But firstly, I'm going to hand over to Uri and Clara, who are going to give us our first treat at this picnic together.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. So we're going to get moving. It's an invitation to move, an invitation to step up and away from your screen, whatever that means for you. You can wheel away if you're on a wheelie chair, you can stand up. I invite you to keep your camera on. Again, if that's really uncomfortable for you, you can turn it off. And we're going to put some music on, and I'm going to guide you through some inspiration, and you can react to that however you like. You can, at first especially, again, I invite you to maybe step aside from your camera and find some privacy if that works for you. But after a couple of minutes, I will invite you to come within the camera frame and we will have a look at all the other people that are on the screen, and I will call out some names, and that person will be our leader for a bit. They're going to do some movement, and we're going to copy them. If you can't see that person on your screen, you're going to see someone else that's copying that movement. So I know, because there's probably, like me, the cameras are spread on different pages. Does that sound okay? Any questions? So I invite you to stand up or move away from your screen. And Gail, if you could put some music on, that would be great. So if you take a moment to just move your hips, move guided by your hips. Breathe into it. And then move guided by your feet. Your feet are leading the way. And now your hands are leading the way. Now your head is leading the way. Where is that taking you? Movement can be as small or as big as you want. And your right shoulder is leading the way. And your knees are leading the way. Does that move you in space? Your hips are leading, and perhaps you're going to come towards your screen so you can see other people moving. And we invite Yuri to be our leader for a few seconds. We're going to follow whatever Yuri's doing, our interpretation of it. And I'm going to invite Neha to lead the way. And I will invite Sarah Macbeth to lead the way. Joanne, can you lead the way? And Christina, can you lead the way? And Yarima Malik, can you lead the way? And Pippa Scott, can you lead the way? And Sarah Al-Fegali, can you lead the way? Thank you. And now we're going to wind it down and take these arms down to our chair. And Gail, if you can bring down our music. If you want to stay standing, that's also fine, I think, with what's coming next. Yuri, over to you. I hope that everyone enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was nice. I feel, since COVID, I've started to do maybe too much Zoom. And I'm a theater practitioner, and now I'm teaching on Zoom theater. So it's, nobody thought before, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it does make you sit more than I used to. But then you don't have to sit all the time in a way. So we should have a Zoom standing sessions and just moving sessions. So that's great. Thank you, Clara. The invitation now actually, this is coming a bit from a practice that I'm trained in and working with called social presence in theater. And the invitation now is actually kind of move into the stuck. So the stuck is the places where we feel stuck. And it could be, the stuck could be something you experience professionally or personally. You will not need to share anything about this stuck with people here. We're just going to kind of sense into this stuck. And my teacher, Arwana Hayashi, when she speaks about stuck, it's also important to remember that stuck, you are not your stuck. Stuck is something you wear, like a shirt. Like I wore this shirt today. So stuck is not you. Stuck is something you feel. And that stuck could be a gold mine. Sorry for the extractive metaphor, but in the sense that it can teach us something about where we are. So stuck is kind of something that can be useful. And we're going to use our body to sense into our stuck. So the first thing I'm going to invite you to think about the stuck. And the stuck could be something connected to what we just discussed about. So it could be, has to do with governance or collective imagination, but it could be something completely different. And once you have the stuck, and I'm going to kind of demo it, where, if you can stand, and I saw some of you can stand, then it's better. Then we're going to kind of embody our stuck shape. So it's not trying to mime anything, or it's just how it feels. So I'm going to just take a shape, like this could be one of my stuck, and going to precise it until it really feels like this is how it feels like. This is my stuck, or it could be something else. But so just we'll spend some time, anyone on their own, just kind of trying to precise our stuck. And then once we have the stuck very clear, we can also look around, which looking around in this case means look to our screens and see some other stucks and notice what we see around us. Maybe there are some stucks that are sort of similar. We might need to move our stuck a bit closer to look around without breaking our stuck. Yeah. And we kind of back to our stuck, and then we're going to feel into this stuck feeling, the stuck shape, and seeing what wants to emerge. So the body has its own intelligence. That's a premise. And it kind of wants to go somewhere. So it's not the solution. It's not somehow the best thing that could happen. It's more like what wants to happen next. So if I allow my body to move from this shape, what does the body wants to do? And I'm just going to follow that for a little while. So the stuck is not sustainable. So where does this stuck wants to go? And I just allow it to change until I find another shape, which feels like the next thing that wants to happen. And then when I'm in this new shape, we can call it R stuck 2. I can also say a sentence or a word of just how it feels like. And we might not hear it, but if you want us to hear it, you might need to unmute. So just whatever comes from that new sentence. And for me is, I open my heart. I turn towards it.
Care and compassion.
In.
My words are heart opening.
Release.
A swirl around the problems.
Offer connection.
Reveal vulnerability.
I receive,
opening and a softening.
I receive and give in equal measure.
Supportive.
Loosening up and letting go.
Now we can take another moment to sense together and maybe also notice each other. Maybe we can have another kind of collective next step. So what will be our collective next step from this? And you can take a little bit of sensing from your body and a little bit of sensing from our little social body, maybe creating a collective image here of what we can all do together with our stocks. And if you want to say kind of a word or a sentence from this collective shape, you can do that. So I notice our hands opening and reaching out to the sides.
My words are give what you want to receive.
Balance or imbalance?
Strength and connection.
Holding.
Uplifting.
Open.
Sharing bounty.
So thank you, everyone. We'll take a moment to kind of release our shapes and kind of, if you want to stretch and shake, maybe the stuck was sticking, so you can unstuck your stuckness. And yeah, I'm not sure about our time, but I feel to just share that we explored in the Huddle different embodiment, you know, the constellation, the 4D mapping practices. In this one, I called embodied dreaming, and it kind of mixes a lot of things. And essentially what I want to say, and Clara also wrote very nicely in our agenda, that there is something about using the body to imagine that I think would be very useful, both in terms of kind of grounding this imagination world, but also opening up for information that maybe otherwise the mind is kind of blocking out, both in terms of the challenges, but also in terms of the solutions that are already here with us. I don't know.
Yeah, and can I add to that, Yuri? I also, what's come for me is how before meetings that have agendas and that there's specific things to be discussed, how does this kind of work invite to approach those things very differently? Like how are we as people when we come in straight into a government meeting around policy and project and delivery, and how is it if we step back and do this kind of work and then ask those questions, and the transformation that can happen and the possibilities that open up thanks to that. So hopefully, I mean, I'm feeling a little glow after that, a little softening, which I think makes me more available to do the difficult thinking and exchanges. And I think carving that space is really precious. Thank you, Yuri.
Yeah, we're within time. I don't know if anyone wants to share something from this moment, like a comment. Otherwise, we move to the next bit.
There's a comment in the chat, Yuri. I don't know if you want to answer to it.
Which one?
Well, so someone just put, I don't really understand how exploring stuck seems to be so positive for people. The best I could do is not be in fight mode. Do you want to answer to that?
Yeah. So I think obviously different people can experience in different ways. What I like about how Arowana presents the stuck is that stuck is part of a creative process. So being stuck and the idea with working with our stuck, it's also to be in a creative process. So there's, and in some cases, you know, we embody our stuck and we just feel the stuck more, and that's also okay, or that's part of the process as well. Sometimes we need to feel where we're stuck in order to move forward, and sometimes something opens up and then we start to sense also, we don't like to maybe use unstuck, but somehow some new information might arise. So but I don't know, I guess other people can say like what was positive about stuck. Deborah.
I liked Christina's comment in the chat where she says, no, I've lost it now. She said, reminds me of the notion that perhaps imagination is not where we go to escape reality, but where we go to remember reality, how things truly are, which can, in its own way, bring you to that grief space and then bring you to that space of possibility that can arise from that.
And it may take longer to arrive. That was a very small, short taster. The idea, I think, is to expand that work over a bit more time. But I would say also we voiced after having transport from the stuck. Yuri didn't ask us to voice where we were at the first stuck position. It was interesting that, yeah, it seemed like our second stuck for many of us was almost a solution to the first stuck, or a moving on from, but it doesn't have to be that. Sometimes it isn't, and that's okay.
Yeah, thank you also for the question, and I think the question itself is opening to something. And Kath, and maybe then we'll move to the next bit.
Yeah. Hello, yes, thank you so much. I mean, it's such a joy to work with the body, and it just reminds me of, I guess, lots of different approaches and thinking that really honours the wisdom that is inside the body, and so this feels like the heart, for example, was one of those really powerful centers, and like how can we also use that and tune into those different centers and places and really come into our bodies as like access points to renewed feelings and renewed energies, and come with that. And so yeah, and just maybe a quick share, I guess, from my experience with ecstatic dance or 5 rhythms, or that sort of conscious dance practices, the more you go into it, the more you can get from it as well. So it's sort of maybe something for, yeah, us to, or it's like a very personal journey of depth within those sorts of practices as well that can offer a lot through our own journeying with them. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and I'll move it to Natalie and for the next.
Hi, Shruti and I are going to take you through this next offering to you, and this is imagining with words. So we've been together in the forest for a good hour or so, and now that we've spent a bit of time together, what we're going to do is spend some time making a wish. So we've come to a tree, and we see on the tree there is space for us to put a message. And what we're going to do in a little bit is spend some time thinking for ourselves what our wish is. So if we had a fairy tale ending, thinking about what collective imagination can bring, or what our contexts have, what is our wish for the context that we're bringing to the forest today? And I'd like you to just spend a minute or so on your own thinking about what that is. And I think Shruti will share the link to the mural where you can see the tree where you can hang your wish. Once you've done that, we're going to go into little groups just to talk about the things we've put on the tree together, and then we'll come back as a big group and just share any thoughts from our smaller groups. So 2 or 3 minutes. If you are not someone who feels particularly overjoyed about using mural, or mural is not something you're familiar with, then you're very welcome to put your wish in the chat and someone will add it to the tree for you. So I'll give us a couple of minutes just to do that quietly until about 11:23. Any questions before we go and do that?
Could you type the question in the chat?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, it's Shruti's already ahead of us. Thank you.
And just to add to those writing in the mural, the picnic baskets for the next activity, if you can just write your offerings on the notes on the tree, that would be great. Or move them up there once you're done.
Eyes are at your hands, saying goodnight to all we had, riding on your back, made your babies laugh. Mama was a queen, Papa is a king.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone.
Trying hard to prove
as mentioned in the chat. So, what I'm going to do now is send you into different breakout rooms and just have a conversation with some other people that you find yourself with about your wish or your fairy tale ending, and to discuss each other's wishes and endings. Thank you.
So we're going into going into break. Sorry, Natalie, the music was a little bit loud, I think, just then. So we're about to go into breakouts to discuss those things that we just wrote on post-its with each other. Share.
How long will we have in the breakouts?
Got 7 minutes, so until 11:30. Oh, and just to remind you, when you're coming back, if someone can share something from your group about what you've been talking about, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, opening the breakouts now.
Everyone, welcome back. And Daniel, how many different breakout rooms were there? Do we know? I'm just going to ask if anyone, I think we might not have time to hear from all of the different groups, but I'm wondering if anyone would like to share anything from, gosh, that's a lot of different groups. Okay. If anyone would like to share anything from their conversation.
You go, Yuri.
Yeah, I just finished. I was kind of cut in the middle of a sentence, so I have like this wanting to finish my sentence. But there was like some discussion about fairy tales and fairy tale ending, and is it an ending, and is it the fairy tales that we grew up on? I was finishing the sentence saying that actually, since being in the Huddle, things started to manifest work-wise that speak to the changes that we got the question from Kath about how do we plan to share this, and I still don't know how we're going to share it on a larger scale, but I can say that already as a practitioner, I could see things manifesting which speak to this Huddle. So the Huddle and the universe sort of communicated. And so things started to actually happen and unlock. So that's something I noticed. Yeah.
The thing that from our little group that really resonated with me was that sense of we were talking about the importance of collective care, and really kind of deep sense of listening and what's it like to be heard, and then do they really hear me? And those are kind of questions that are sitting with me now.
We had a really lovely chat in room 3 around partnerships and what it means to build partners and for this kind of work, and when is the right time to sort of do that at the beginning, or how do those relationships work? And we had a couple of different contexts in our group. So Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gail. I think first, rebounding on what Claire was saying, we also spoke about deep listening and about the importance of giving space. I think Zoe brought this up, and it resonates quite a bit with what Claire was saying earlier, that taking some time and really giving space for people to listen to people. One I think I heard also from Zoe was that, do we really need to tick the box at the end of every meeting with an action, or can we just leave it at such that we can leave some space to think and to leave it a bit more open? Then we also spoke about a different context, which is the different relationships, the partnerships. How can we make them more regenerative, and how can we benefit from toolkits like this toolkit to build relationships that are deeper, where at the end of the day, the ultimate objective is the well-being of the people and of the beings that are around us.
I'm going to finish with an observation of my own, of being an audience person watching dancing, and at a certain point the dancers on the stage saying, "Come and dance with us," and this room full of people standing up and dancing together with the music and the dancers. And I'm going to thank you all for, I did. I went to Hofesh. I'll put details in the chat if anyone is interested. But with these ideas that we've all been talking about and thinking about, it's time to keep them in your minds and move on to the next section, where I think what we're going to be doing is putting things into our picnic baskets to take with us and share. So thank you all, and I will hand over.
Thank you for that lovely offering and another nourishing moment in our picnic together. So now that we've thought about what our dreams might be, we're thinking about some of the things that might help to get us there. So in the mural, again, for those that are able to access, if you can't, we're going to share the questions in the chat, and there'll be an opportunity for someone to copy that over for you. But the invitation is going to be to reflect on the following questions. So what would you like to pack into your imagination picnic? And thinking about everything that you've heard today, that might be snippets or phrases or something that just caught your attention that you want to take away and to share with others. There's also a question of, what do you have an abundance of that you would like to share with others? And this might be something that's a concept that you know about that you think would really be of interest to people in this group. Or it might just be a phrase that you use and holds value to you that you would like others to have the chance to appreciate. Or it might be a tangible offer for help, something that you would actually be up for, an offer for a conversation, a listening ear, or anything that you might imagine and be up for genuinely sharing with people. And then a question of, what's missing? What do you long for? What do you dream of that might help you to make your imagination a reality? And finally, so there are different colored post-it notes for each of those. So the abundance in yellow and what you long for on blue. And the idea is that after we've had a moment to reflect and write these down, then you'll have a chance to read other people's and see if there might be an exchange that could happen. So if you're happy to be contacted or for someone to reach out to you, please put your name on the pink post-it note on the basket. And now, if Daniel, I think you might have already put the questions in the chat. Thank you. We're going to play a short piece of music and have 5 minutes now to reflect and start working on this. And just for anyone that might have audio processing challenges with music while they're writing, I'll pop a note in the chat when the music's turned back off as well. So don't worry about missing out on the next part. But thanks, Daniel, if you wouldn't mind playing the music, if that's okay.
Yes, I will. Could whoever's sharing their screen stop sharing their screen so that I can start? Great, thanks.
Okay. Daniel, would you mind lowering the music for a moment, please? Thank you, everyone. Don't worry, we're not needing to finish up and run away just yet. But now that your baskets are looking a bit more full, the invitation is to have a look at what everyone else has written. And thank you to those of you who have started putting email addresses on your post-it notes. That's actually a much faster way of doing what I was going to suggest we do next. So if you're happy for people to reach out and contact you for a chat about something that's in your basket, then please add your email address. I think that's the fastest way to go about this. And now the invitation is to have a look at what everyone else has got going on in their baskets. Maybe there's something that you would like to borrow, an idea, or share. Or maybe you want to just take a note of that person's email to be able to reach out and have a conversation about something that they've either offered or said that they need. And the idea is it would be lovely to walk away from this virtual picnic with some real life connections and treasures that can continue to nourish us and help us to move towards this dream space that we've got hanging in the trees above us. So yeah, just a few moments to keep going there. And Dan, feel free to pop some music back on if you have something there. I can see that people look like they're still typing and reading, so we're going to have a few more minutes here and then move into our checkout together. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to invite everyone to keep the link open if you want to keep going or take some more notes or, reach out to those people. The mural space will be there. So thank you for coming on this journey with us through the woods from wherever you started and landing at our picnic and some really lovely connections I can see happening in that space already. So hopefully they will come to fruition and be something that we can take away and really step into. And now we've been sitting and typing for a little while. Hopefully there's been some joy in the spaciousness and moments of slowing down and silence, as well as the rich offerings that have been in the space today. And we're going to move towards the checkout. And while you think about the question and invitation to literally move, do any stretching that needs doing, having been on this call for a while, and Dan's going to pop the question in the chat for you, which is just what's one thing that you're savoring from this picnic that you're bringing with you away from this meal together. And yeah, thank you, everyone. And we're just going to pop the answers in the chat and then there'll be an invitation in a moment to come off mute and say goodbye and thank you to everyone in whatever way feels good to you. Oh, there's some really lovely things going in the chat, so I'm just going to voice some of them into the space. We've got that we're savoring feeling empowered by generous energy and the like-minded, embodied, dreaming people. Gratitude, feeling that we have a positive mindset, a mycelial web of connection and sharing resources. unsticking my stuck, and thanks for the opportunity to be in the space with everyone. The fact that there's a community like this out here fills us with hope, feeling strength in this community of quiet radicals, to be brave and bold, to rage. Diversity, open-mindedness, more gratitude, jumping into entanglement and tension with open arms, the connection potential in this group, remembering playfulness, and and joy and silliness and dancing on screen, warmth, so many no's to connect to, so much generosity, and heartwarming to connect with people doing such hopeful work, feeling fully alive, and lots of lovely other words coming in here, spikiness and invitation, feeling fuzzy, finding courage, glittering aliveness with beauty, hope, and community, energized and very, very thankful. Thank you, everyone. We're finishing a few minutes early, it looks like, which is always very impressive. Thank you so much for coming along with us on this journey, and to everyone in my huddle for your parts in hosting. It's been a really fantastic 2 hours, or at least in my experience it has, and I just want to thank you all for that. But yeah, let's respect the time and take a few moments of spaciousness back into our days, and do feel free to come off mute if you would like, or wave, or give any silly gesture that would be the right way for you to say goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Well done. Brilliant. Thank you.
Big thanks.
Thank you.